Plato's Cave is a curious allegory that I think works better from a more skeptical, naturalistic point of view. Now, in order to do that, you kind of have to rework it. And people might be watching going, Plato's Cave allegory? Well, some of you have been living in a cave and clearly haven't been out to see the sun. So, in a nutshell, Plato's Cave has this allegory that describes these people who've always lived. Their existence was down in a cave as slaves, pinned to a wall, technically. They cannot pivot their head one way or the other. They cannot see anything else but a wall in front of them. And there's these objects that are on the wall, shadows, that are made by something else, and they don't know that. They only see the shadow. So imagine there's a fire in the background or a light of some sort in the ancient world casting a shadow on the wall, and these prisoners who are chained to this wall are watching the shadows in front of them that are cast from up ahead, and they think those shadows are reality. They think the shadows that are in front of them is the truth. One day, one of these prisoners breaks free. Somehow, their chains are loosened, and they make their way through the darkness of the cave up and out of this escape. And when they do, the light is so bright that it blinds them. It blinds them, it terrifies them. They don't know what to make of it. And then they see this world with trees and plants and animals, and the brightest part, the peak of the allegory, is the sun. And the sun is supposed to represent like the ultimate good. Because Plato had these ideas, metaphysics of forms, and that educated philosophers could be educated enough to contemplate forms, the real true forms. So the allegory of his cave is actually talking about the world we live in. And that we're currently living in a cave looking at shadows on the wall. So the physical reality of the world is an illusion. And a lot of people who aren't philosophers are trapped in the material world looking at it and saying, this is real. This is the reality. It's kind of funny because as someone who was completely indoctrinated, I was trapped in Christian dogma and, of course, believed now that I've been reading myth thinking it actually happened. I was looking at illusions and thought this is literally true. Once I discovered that these Bible stories never happened. There may be kernels of historical memories behind some of this stuff. There may be some historical data in the stories. Now, you can go to some other obscure passages and say, hey, this prophet may have been living around this time and wrote some of the stuff. Maybe. But I'm talking about Genesis creation, flood of Noah, right? Cain and Abel. I'll list off a bunch so that we're on the same page, right? So we got Cain and Abel. We've got the Tower of Babel. We've got, Nimrod, right? Moving out of Genesis, which I think most, even Christians that are Catholic, will grant, that probably never happened. That's all mythology. Okay. Abraham, his sons, Isaac, Ishmael, getting all the way down into Jacob and then Joseph. All of this is mythology. Don't believe a lick of it is historical. Getting into Moses, right? Dealing with Moses in the Exodus. Highly suspect. Don't even think there was a Moses, but there could have been some random dude they based this name off of. We know Egyptian pharaoh named with Moses, but the name Moses is strange sitting alone. So that's a whole nother thing, right? Then you get to David. You get a mention of David in an inscription, the house of David, but this may be a mythological figurehead, so to speak. Like many Greeks had founding figures of their cities that were invented, that never actually existed. So if there was a David, he was likely a chieftain, some kind of tribal leader of a local town. That's it. Not an empire, not a massive kingdom ruler and a king. His son Solomon, you can go ahead and scratch any of that being historical, and I don't even know if there really ever was a Solomon to begin with. And you can see all the mythology that built off Solomon and him being the ruler of demons, controlling demons later in lore. You keep going down and you can finally start hitting, rubber hits the road, you start finding historical figures, right? You could doubt Ezra and Nehemiah's existence. Was there a Josiah? Maybe. We don't have external sources that mention him. There are people throughout the Bible in these times that did exist. My point is I was reading these stories and believing that they actually happened. I believed that God was working through this and this was inspired literature. I believed the shadows were literally real. And then I discovered, hold on, these are stories. Through all the years of studying and reading and learning and listening to experts and critical scholars, it made more sense when you weigh out both options that this operates like literature from its own period and other literature that has similar genre, themes, tropes, etc., that lack this archaeological external data for the stories. You see, you can go and find Troy, or at least scholars think they found the city that is claimed to be Troy. You can find elements of these stories from the Iliad, right? You could find archaeological clues that whoever wrote or told these stories knew. They knew some of the setting, the geography, and even knew potentially names from tradition of people who did probably exist. So I say all that to say, I started to realize these stories never happened. And I was looking at the shadows on the wall using Plato's Cave. And when I exited the cave, I started to come in contact with other tools to ascertain what I think the truth is. And now I'm talking about truth, and I know many people will get into metaphysics and epistemology and all this kind of stuff. And I think the best way I can try to ascertain what I think reality is, will start with senses. Senses are a role in this, but also measurable tools that can go beyond intuition. What do I mean? Science. There's a lot of stuff we discovered through measure, observation, testing, and such, that our human intuitions and observations, our eyes can deceive us, right? So you can't just go off your senses. You have to be able to measure and test and observe. And with these tools, what I have discovered and I'm comfortable with is that I'll never have everything figured out. We're never going to know it all, right? We're always going to have blind spots. We're humans. We're primates that evolved on a planet to survive and reproduce. And, we're socially cohesive, but at the end of the day, we're not meant to have this ultimate, absolute understanding of all existence. That is something that I think is an illusion itself. It's a comforting myth that we tell ourselves so that we die in peace, so that we feel comfortable when the uneasy comes, when life throws its wild winds and destructive fires at us. Well, we have something to rest our confidence on psychologically. So we tell ourselves these things. And Plato had this category for the philosophers as if they could ascertain the true forms of beyond this physical or the physical world into the metaphysical. And I am much more based in naturalism, which might be contrary, of course, to what Plato was suggesting, but I think it makes better sense of figuring out reality. See, now I can perceive the sun, and rather than seeing it as the ultimate good in an allegory, I see it as something that can be used that way in narrative form. You can use it in several ways in narrative form, not to be Jordan Peterson on you, but it actually is a object that we've used to help us see galaxies and literally stars light years, billions of light years away. So we've now been able to get closer to using and observing what a sun is, what our sun is, made up of gases and such. We're getting closer to what actually is these objects. Now, if you want to live in the metaphysical and think you're escaping this world, go for it, but you're living in that very shadow that I think we need to get out of and try to focus on using the best tools. Because even when we're using the best tools to find out what the truth is, we're still kind of blind in the dark. You see, in my version of this cave, I don't have it all figured out and never will. But I think we're getting closer to a world that makes better sense, that we can actually grasp without absolutisms that Plato seemed to suggest. Escaping the cave, I escaped the dogma of my religion. I escaped believing these things actually happened. So there's no shackles on this literature or the social communities surrounding this cultic mindset. And once you leave that, you can be critical of that and any and all other literature. See, when you're a Christian, you could do that with Islam or you could do that with other faiths, but you can't do it with your own. And so with me, I can do that and be somewhere of a I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know. But that leaves room for wanting to know and trying to figure it out. And it also leaves flexibility. So when we find out new facts about our world or about ourselves, that can change. We can change those things. Because if we have absolutes that we believe are true, but they end up being shadows, then we can't change those dogmas because our system is, these are the truths. These are the things we believe. And that's the scary part, because once you put truth outside of what can be tested, observed, and experienced through sensory and observable, testable facts, guess what? It's untouchable. That's a dogma. We have a belief in this thing, and that thing, it's God, it's good, it's ultimate. And so if someone can place in that ultimate their own subjective, what they believe to be the truth, the good, well, we can end up in a bad place. And so no matter what you do, I feel like when I did this thought experiment, thinking about the cave, it made me think that really no matter what, we're always still going to be in some kind of cave. But I feel like we could get closer to realizing what reality is. And I think natural thought, naturalism, is a better way of trying to figure that out than pretending you know something you don't know. Pretending you have access to knowledge beyond what we all are experiencing and seeing. You have revelation through divine dreams, visions, or a text that has been so dissected and obviously human that I'm left with no other choice but to walk out of this cave and try to tell others, hey, look, these are myths. These are stories. So I go back into the cave after I recognize this truth and I get yelled at. I get threatened. I get told, you're wrong, you're full of it. We have absolutes. We have the absolute truth. You can't ground your morality without this absolute good, absolute God in this metaphysical. And they're looking at the shadow and all they got to do is say, that's absolute. The shadow's absolute. They have no proof. They have nothing to prove or show. They could just say it, it's gospel, and they do it with presuppositionalism, they do it with ethics, they do it with the guide of life, period, and how we're supposed to navigate these things. And you know, as a father, just to use another analogy, as I started raising my 3 boys, I realized that we humans don't really know what the hell we're doing. Like, we're raising another human. It's another life. It's like, I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm feeling my way in the dark. I'm trying my best to give them everything I can that helps them to make it good in this life. And maybe some illusions are necessary. This is where I'm coming full circle. Maybe some illusions we need to tell ourselves. I don't know. But maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we need to really throw away the old myths and at least not believing them as dogma at all. Like, not throw them away as in you can't study them and learn them. I love that. But like, studying them for what they are, stories, culturally time-stamped stories that may have wisdom beyond that, but for certain people at certain times, this was crafted for them. And to understand that is awesome without buying it as dogma and belief. And I think when we keep trying to hold on to this ancient truth, and I say ancient truth in scare quotes as in they believe this is true, and try to pull that into our now when it doesn't fit, it's kind of like a 1970s haircut in 2025. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. A lot of people go, what the heck are you doing, man? You look. Now, some people are trying to bring back this older style of haircut. I'm just making an analogy. You might say, that's odd. That doesn't fit. So what should we do? What should we do? Should we contemplate metaphysics and act like we know true forms? The sun is ultimate good and it's an illusion? Or do we see the sun as a ball of gas and particular elements that make up parts of our universe and also our earth, and naturally look at the things that we know and can test and observe and make that our basis for trying to get closer to reality, the truth, and then construct ways to navigate that for society, ethics, beliefs about the universe, or the world. That is kind of where I'm at right now. And I think the allegory of the cave works better for me in a naturalist worldview, still granting that we may still have illusions because we're just, humans trying to make our way in the dark a little. And science often comes to contradict our intuitions. So we have no choice but to have to reconcile with things that don't make sense with our basic intuitions of what seems common sense. Science flips that stuff a lot of times. And that's the powerful point. I think that's a good tool. That's something we need. If I'm missing something in this image that I'm painting here using the allegory of the cave, please tell me down below. But that's how I feel. I escaped the cave. I'm trying to tell others about the Bible, about other stories. Now I'm about to do this series on Islam. My first video is coming soon. And I get a lot of hate from particular people who think the shadows are real. Those shadows are the truth. They're it. And so I'm not saying when I left the cave, I found it, the ultimate. But I think I've gotten closer to realizing if there's a shadow, I know one when I see it now. And I look at all these stories and realize, and the reason I feel that way is that I've learned a lot of tools, finding out genre, finding out how man-made, how human we are, studying the human primate, figuring out how the brain operates, why we craft myths, why we make up shit, why we do this. And then Plato himself kind of gave the blueprint on how we can construct a national identity by placing laws as far back in the past as you can that were God-given and divine. You must believe these laws and obey this revelation back here. And that's what we find. We find something like what Plato's describing. And sure enough, the Bible does that quite well. And so do other texts. So I don't think we're ever going to get it, but I think we can get closer to understanding reality and living in a better world where we can change based on the facts and get closer to something of reality than what we would by playing make-believe and metaphysics and mental masturbation with the philosophical school that Plato's kind of pulling at. The other thing is you could democratize, you can get more people to learn this. See, Plato had this kind of idea that the philosophers are the ones who know this, but most people don't, and most people shouldn't. They didn't really have this idea of, let's teach everyone this. Whereas with science and with these tools, I'm saying everyone can get a hand on this. We can educate everyone, and we're trying to. So what do you think? Do you think that my position has a blind spot? Is this also a shadow? And if it is, why would this not be a better tool, even if there's shadows on the wall with this, than the shadows on the wall with belief systems and trying to completely indulge in a fiction that is totally made up by people in antiquity, instead of trying to construct something with the best, latest, cutting-edge tools we have? Just a thought. The only thing I can think of is that, myths do help us in a cohesive manner in society. And if we need to pull together, you can easily gravitate towards something that has deep tradition in the past and myths that people can, unite on. But I feel like we need to figure out a way to be cohesive without needing to go, I need the Jewish God. I need the Christian Jesus. I need, Muhammad. Why can't we figure out a way to break out of this? You tell me in the comment section. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. This was on my mind this morning as I was watching a video about Plato's Cave. And I thought to myself, the cave allegory would work better, I think, with what we know about the universe now. I don't think Plato had nearly the grasp that we do scientifically today. And if he did, what would he believe now? Would he still be arguing the same things? Would he still be thinking that the material world is all an illusion and that there's really these higher forms, when now we can see other galaxies, other universes? There's not these 7 spheres of heaven, so to speak. What would Plato think today? And would he be arguing against my position here, or would he be saying, actually, I have to neglect the prior model now that we know more? Who knows? Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We've got tons and tons of videos right now. I did interviews with Richard Carrier. We covered everything from celestial crucifixion, Dark Ages, his debate on Islam, all sorts of stuff. I'm editing Dennis McDonald's interviews that I've done. I've got some documentaries in the works that are coming. I've got the Islam series first video, which is going to deal with the sleepers in the cave. I think and hope that this series on Islam becomes the go-to for anyone who really wants to see the human thumbprint on the Quran and really see how man-made this religion is. It's easier to show than even the Gospels, than the New Testament, in my opinion. And for me, that, there's a lot there, but Quran's even easier than that. So I look forward to what we have coming. Consider joining us. We could really use your help. Be a patron, join the YouTube membership. Definite support is needed, and it's been some tough times here on YouTube for a while now. So I could use your help. I appreciate everybody who's tuned in. So like the video, comment down below. YouTube watches for that engagement. They look for those shadows on the wall, and share this bad boy out there. Until next time, see you then.